supposedly healthy for us.
What's that?
Um, oh, I said it's supposedly healthy for us, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
No, I
Um,
just stay focused on what we can take care of and ignore the rest, right?
yeah, exactly. It's the serenity prayer at work there. Did you, by the way, I sent the two videos like completely through Google Photos, so I
Yep,
wasn't sure if that appeared. Okay, so you got them.
I got
All right,
them, and let
cool.
me see. I haven't opened either one, but I was able to pull up I was able to get them on the browser, so they're ready to go.
Perfect. Do you want me to start
Oops.
with just like a couple, it's sort of like questions slash comments, or do you want to
Sure.
look at the video first and then I can,
Let
I'm
me
just kidding.
open the videos and let's make sure
Everything's playing.
that we can play them. And did you want to start with the groundwork or the writing
Sorry. Probably the groundwork, I think makes the most sense because I always long line her
first?
before, yeah. And those aren't the same day, but I just wanted you to be able to see both.
That's fine. It's just, it might take a little while to load. Okay. All right.
No problem. I can just pass my stuff. Okay. So one of the so in general, I feel like I am getting the hang of supporting her more on the long lines. Like it's definitely not perfect,
I see that.
but it's better. And like a lot of the days she can make her way down to a relatively significant long and low. And similar under saddle. So like that's definitely headed in the right direction.
She definitely looks more stable through her back and hindquarter. That's the first thing that catches my eye.
Super.
And your support is getting really accurate. That's way better. Um,
It's definitely still a very active thing in my head because my tendency is still to do a little too little.
yeah,
But like the more I kind of slow myself down enough and really keep the inside rein very stable, I can definitely start to feel more and more and more in a small way.
yeah.
And also, sorry, could you hear a lot of background noise right now?
Not at your place. I just turned off the sound to the video. There was some sound on the video I just muted.
Okay, perfect. It was
Yeah.
probably like my fiance talking to me or something. Okay, I'm
Oh,
glad because there's like landscaping right outside my window, and on my end it's super loud, but as long as you can still hear me,
no, I hear you
um,
clearly. I don't hear the background noise.
great.
Yeah, so
So
she's actually really enjoying the work too. Like she
yeah,
is exploring and thinking about it. And she's in sort of the right mental emotional state for you to keep playing with, kind of pushing that level of support and accuracy.
cool.
As you get more comfortable with a little more tension on the reins, she's going
Yeah,
to accept it. You can kind of see that she now understands. She might still stop a lot because it's difficult physically, but she's
yeah,
not stopping as an avoidance and she's not stopping because she's stressed. She's just stopping
yeah,
because she's kind of trying to figure out how to change her coordination.
yeah,
And you're
very
not
much.
far away, you're really not far away from the amount of support I would be giving her. Like
Okay,
that inside rein, staying stick straight is sort of what
yep,
I look for. And
gotcha.
if the inside rein is straight and heavy, or you're having to use quite a lot of pressure on the outside rein, as she stabilizes her own back and hindquarter, you don't change the feel, she does.
Gotcha. I think
So
I've felt small instances of that.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
how we feel them starting to manage their own body weight better, because what makes them heavy is the body weight landsliding forward to the
yeah,
left, forward to the front, and them not being able to have enough pelvic engagement or stability through the back to even control their own body weight.
yeah,
And that's what
totally.
makes the reins heavy.
Yeah. And right now, it's almost a bit, it's not exciting, but it's just for her to actually start to put weight into reins, even just with the halter. is a big deal. She's a horse that, ridden in a traditional dressage setup, it was always like we needed to build up the contact. It would never be too much, but it would be erratic and changing and always in a version of extension or almost always in a version of extension. So I'm
Yes.
happy if she starts to actually be like, oh my God, there's maybe too much in the rein and it's not always what we want, but it's the opposite direction of what we've had for 5, 6 years.
And
So,
what they go through is like when they won't take a rein contact, like you're describing in the past, it's because they're using the neck and the forehand to stabilize the body. And so
totally.
what you
So,
have is they can't really take more pressure because they're doing so much muscular holding. And
mhm,
there's more weight on the forehand when the back is dropped and the hindquarters disengaged, but we don't see it because all the muscles are pulling upward against that weight.
ton of sense.
And
Yeah.
then as soon as you start to stabilize, like you've just done a beautiful job, that saddle is rocking a lot less.
Yep.
Her pelvis is tilting less. She's got a steadier rhythm in her walk, less sort of stopping, rushing. It's more
Yeah.
of a rhythmic walk. And that length through her neck is just fantastic. That's the thing you can't fake.
Yeah.
And what happens is as the back and hindquarter starts to stabilize skeletally, that's what lengthens the muscles of the top line that we see at the end through the neck.
Gotcha.
And
Gotcha.
the tricky part from there is they lengthen and fall forward because as soon as they lengthen the neck and they're not holding with the tension, they sort of go, oh, it threw my back and hindquarters back out of stability. And so
Yep.
it's sort of this front back teetering.
Your totter. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that's why as you're getting really good on the long reins, when she's lengthening her neck and going into that long and low, like there,
Yes.
that's
Yep.
when a little bit more tension on the reins and
Yep.
maybe seeing if she could do one circle, like one small circle.
It's
Those
yeah.
those two things help her learn how to keep the top line muscles long and supple and maintain skeletal stability through the spine and pelvis.
Yeah. So like it's interesting because it's not on this is a particularly short long lining video. It's just kind of when I had someone available to grab a video. But
Hmm.
I do tend to do like a bit of around the whole arena, which is small anyways. And then like as if she seems to get super unstable, or almost the opposite, like when you said, oh, she's starting to really actually let go and reach more with the neck. I often have been doing it just intuitively, which is great. It's the right thing. A
Yes.
few smaller circles. And then that usually really solidifies like the engagement behind and the reach. And then we go, yeah, back out. And then if we lose it again, we go back to the circle. The circle, it's so interesting because she is definitely still at the point where right before she truly lets go, she's got to stop and process like a couple
Yeah.
different times. And every once in a while, there'll be a day where she'll just start out, like in sort of the longest, most engaged position, she's sort of showed in this video, and she'll just stay there. But it's like 1 out of 10 times. So this is a more accurate portrayal of this, how much we still change and, when we go into extension and all of that.
And
Um,
so play with the long reins this way because you're going to find she's as she improves her balance, like she's really ready to start gaining a little momentum with the positive changes. You've worked your way through the sort of strongest habits of dysfunction. She's not reverting into her oldest, strongest habit. She's really searching for the new. And
Yep.
she's going to make more mistakes, but play with it this way. If she starts halting a lot, losing forward, or shortening the neck, whether it's up or sort of over curling,
Go
then
large.
go large, straight lines.
Okay.
And as soon as she lengthens the neck, especially if it's nose towards the ground, start playing with various size circles or turns.
Okay.
And
Cool.
even if she goes really, really slow, if she's not halting, she's exploring the engagement.
Yep. And
And
she,
so as long as she's moving, you're golden to stay on the circle.
cool, cool. She definitely, like after she halts a few times on the smaller circles, goes into a creep walk, but it's by far when her nose is like basically on the ground.
Yeah.
And it's the most level the pelvis ever gets. And her steps
Yes.
are really, really short, but there's still some movement back there, but it's as little as I've ever seen it. So
Yes.
at least I
And
knew like enough of the landmarks to be like, okay, just let her go this slow.
yes, because what triggers dressage riders that they can't stand is slow and small strides. I get it. Mechanically,
Yeah.
mechanically,
It's literally a trigger. That's why I'm laughing. And it's like, yeah, which is good for me to deal with. I get a lot of practice with it now.
yeah,
But
yeah. But
yeah.
mechanically, as far as what lifts the back, what stabilizes pelvic engagement, what keeps the neck long, and what elevates the front end is the combination of what you're doing with the long reins is keeping her level through the back and hindquarter, which is half of what I call internal straightness, right? So internal straightness and then balancing the braking and pushing mechanisms of the body equals lifting the back, engaging the hindquarter, everything we want, right? So the most important aspect of knowing that we're balancing the braking and pushing force management functions of the mechanism, I call it, includes back muscles, spine, pelvic bones, all hindquarter muscles, and leg placement, hind leg placement. It's for
Mm,
all legs, but I focus on hind leg placement. So when her hind leg comes forward and lands, it's beginning the braking phase of the stride. So when we want more engagement and we want deeper placement of the hind legs, that's related to slowing and controlling
yeah.
weight, right?
Yep.
The pushing phase is from peak vertical behind the torso.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's confusing because there's technically called a braking and pushing use of the back muscles. And it's a balance between basically locomotory use and stabilizing use.
Okay.
So So braking is how she controls her body weight, which is what loads unloads the front legs.
Mm,
What lifts the back is an equalization of the back muscles between locomotion and stability, braking and pushing.
that
And
makes a
that
ton of
has to go, it has to work in conjunction with an equalization of the hind leg stride between the braking phase to peak vertical to the pushing phase. So all of that is just to say in a nutshell, equal is more important than anything else.
sure.
Equal, right? And so I look at tempo. I go,
Mm,
tempo is the advanced work on impulsion. Right
yep.
now, the fact that she's not stopping and
Right.
not trotting, we're kind of getting in the ballpark. And she's developing her own rhythm. And at this stage, I let them choose their speed and stride length. And I only make a correction if it's a full transition up or down. But as long
This
as she's in the walk, she's exploring that balance between braking and pushing. And when you see her get a little bit rhythmic with a long neck,
yep.
you're developing impulsion. And it has zero to do with stride length and speed. Zero.
Yeah.
It has
Yeah.
everything to do with equality. And so most horses like her that have been disengaged and unstable through the hindquarters, it's need a beady strides. Like if they can only bring their hind legs 6 inches forward, then we have to reduce the pushing phase,
Yeah.
right?
How is that where you use the circles to reduce the pushing? Because she obviously, I mean, her braking ability is very limited right now, and
Yeah,
the pushing is way too much, and that's just what's developed over 15 years.
yes. And so the
Yeah.
beauty of circles, well, the beauty of straight on a circle, and I want to change your definition of that. To me, the part that's missing on straight as on a circle is number one, it's literal from nose to tail. There's no banana.
Yeah.
And two, the most important aspect, which is what you're affecting on the long reins, is level on a circle.
Right. No
When you can
rotation.
keep the back and hind quarter level on a circle, that's what automatically deepens the placement of the hind legs.
Gotcha.
Automatically. That's why once she's in long and low, the circle is your best friend on the long reins,
Gotcha.
right? But the two things you're up against are when you get an authentic long and low because of internal straightness, all horses reduce forward.
Yeah.
Anytime you're on a circle, all horses reduce forward.
Just because I,
So being on the circle is the tricky part, and that's why I go, even if they're creeping along in a cloud of turtle dust, if they're self-propelled on a circle with a long neck, we're building all the right muscles, all the right coordination.
what's been so interesting too, just because I'm into a lot of the body work and a lot of the science of relaxation with that, is when she starts to go on the circle, find that turtle speed, even though it's, she's not holding it for like 5 minutes, but
Okay.
and really decompress the muscles over the top line, she almost always chews a bit and releases the jaw.
Hmm.
And she almost never does that any other place, unless someone's doing like a high weight release or something on her. Like she has been the driest mouth horse. It's just what
Well,
she does
and
not.
that's to me,
Yeah.
this is the problem with either training strategies or bodywork strategies that are focused on the jaw, the neck, the TMJ, the pull, and all
Right.
that. With horses, none of that can release as long as it's being used to stabilize movement.
Yeah.
So until the hindquarter, until the pelvis and back are doing their job, it's kind of a repeated futile effort to
Totally.
keep releasing
Yeah.
because she goes, no, I kind of need that tight, otherwise I might fall over.
Yeah. Right. It's why all the holding patterns always come back unless they
Hmm.
can start to figure out. And same with the chiropractic work. It's just, yeah.
Yeah. And what you're doing now, and you're getting super accurate at really, she's telling you that like every time she's lengthening the neck and not falling forward, she's starting to control her body weight. But there can be a little bit in what looks like long and level. If you're still seeing the saddle crooked or the pelvis
Yeah.
crooked,
It's
it's
that
the
sneaky.
last, it's actually the last vestige of extension. It's the last few degrees of extension. And so the more unstable the back and hindquarter have been, the more I kind of want to see a full nose on the ground version of long and low.
Yeah.
Eh,
We definitely spend a decent amount of time still in that sneaky neck is longish, but there's still a fair amount of rotation.
And it's
And
better.
luckily
It's better
it is
because
better.
what you're doing is going from sort of the maximum degrees of dropping the back to the last few degrees of it moving that way. But her
Yeah.
nose on the ground tells you you have a full reversal of direction
Yeah.
in from extension to flexion.
And interestingly, this isn't always true with the riding, but it's a little bit more true with the riding than the long lining, is that since I think we probably worked together roughly a month ago, and then I've been sitting on her like roughly twice a week, not a lot. We can get into some of the physical stuff with her I'm a little worried about. But when I have been riding, she actually holds the long and low better. And I
Yeah,
did not expect that.
I know. Isn't that a surprise?
It really was
Yeah.
because I was like, I'm putting weight on her back. Like she's fat. She's weak. Like that's why I've been so funny about riding her. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe I need to do this. I still like to warm her up beforehand because for her, it just helps get her in the learning frame of mind. But I was surprised. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Uh,
that's what I mean. I never know until I try, but there's a
yeah.
distinct every horse, and there's no predictability to it whatsoever. But every horse will, at a certain point, like if you're dealing with a high stress horse, the groundwork is typically the better place to start. But once you're out of stress mode and you're working on physical balance,
Yeah.
um, every horse is either going to make changes better with a rider or without.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
what that
And
tells me is if she can hold a deeper long and low while you're riding, that your body weight is helping her feel stable in the right place. You're kind of acting like a ballast while she's learning to let go of the neck without falling forward on her front legs.
gotcha.
That's that front to back sort of, excuse me,
Peter cutter.
how do I lengthen without falling?
Yeah.
Because at first, and this is why I'm not allergic to long and low. I go, when they're coming out of extension, you get barely enough stability through the back and hindquarters that the top line muscles finally release that chronic shortening and they lengthen. But as soon as they lengthen, that heavy head and neck is like they can't control the body weight yet. So everything landslides forward into long and low. And with some horses, with your weight up there, it helps them figure out how to hold the length and regain the stability in the back and hindquarter, which is
Yeah,
ultimately what they all have to learn to do as a coordination.
totally.
Yeah.
And she like he started filming like literally right when I got on. I don't spend a
Mhm.
long time on her, but like she kind of finds it more consistently, but right now she keeps kind of going in and out of it. But uh, it's it's been
So
interesting.
I still agree that you should warm her up on the long reins, even if it's short. And a couple of things when you get on her. If
Yeah.
she does that, if she shortens the neck for any reason whatsoever, there, yeah, just what you did. Put in a turn.
Yeah.
And if she also loses her mental focus, if she
That
has a
happens a lot.
yeah, so if she gets distracted and shortens the neck, she's always going to look in a particular direction.
Mhm.
The way to get her mind back into focusing on you and release the anxiety immediately is just use the opposite rein to turn 180 degrees the other way. So if she sort of looks right, you make an immediate random left turn. If she sort of looks left, you make an immediate random right turn.
Yeah.
And as soon as she's back with you, you quit turning.
Okay.
So that could be 3 steps. That could be 30 circles. I don't care.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. It used to be 30 circles and now it's probably closer to like 10 steps, which is great.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's kind of got this, and you've got the idea. And I think what I want to focus on that would help her a lot is what some of the stuff you're doing with your body as a rider. So if we look at the first thing I look at the rider is the lumbar, core, and pelvis, upper thigh.
Totally.
This area of your body, if we put a bowl of water inside your pelvis, do you see how much it would slosh?
Yes, very much. It's like I was noticing, and it's been a chronic thing for me, the wobbles
That
that
front
I have.
back sloshing.
Yep. Yep. And
Hmm.
it's like I've been focusing so much on the lateral stability, and then when
Which
I
you've
watched
got.
the front back, I was like, oh God. Yeah, at the cost of the
Hmm.
longitudinal stability. But yeah.
So a couple of things to try. When you get
Okay.
on and you take your normal position, and I want you to play with this at halt and walk
Okay.
with the
Okay.
emphasis on you, and you have some mirrors. If your brain starts objecting too hard, you have some mirrors to look at. But you're
There's your
going to
break.
play, the first thing to play with is when you get in your riding position that's normal, you're just going to notice, is my weight more in my upper half or my lower half of my body? You're good at keeping it in the lower half, but you're just going to double check that, especially when horses start wanting long and low. You don't want to start bringing weight in up into your shoulders and upper body.
Full disclosure, me being decent at keeping my center of gravity lower is really new, even as a dressage rider. I used to like I just would raise my center of gravity as like a I rode a lot of really tricky things and it was a defensive strategy to kind of keep myself off the horse's back before they exploded. And it's not effective, but
Right.
so
But it's where
it's
you
a
went.
new thing. It's where I went. And
Yeah.
so it's really the past couple of years where it's like, okay, actually lower your center of gravity. So I still need to work on it because I still have to actively think about it, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
So then anytime you feel, because it first with the rider, because it's weight, it's internal weight management. We can think of our body weight like sandbags or sand, and the horse's movement is like the flow of water. And so, what we're doing with our body before we give a single aid, the very first thing we do that is the aid is how we use our torso and our body weight. And it's the last thing we do when the horse is in self carriage. So, it's sort of the first and last aid with our legs, reins, everything else in between somewhere. And so a couple of things you can play with in your own body to get the hang of this, because it's not about a position, it's about
Yeah.
force management, right?
Yep, totally. And she
So
does not like me wobble. I can't be rigid, but she does not like the wobble.
that's
Uh,
what I'm going to help you with,
yeah.
because as
Thank you.
soon as you nail what we're going to work on about you, she's going to stay in long and low. And you're going to feel her start to play with her speed and play with transitions. Right now, when she's in long and low, she stays there longer because your weight itself is just creating that counterbalance to her back and hindquarters. But every time we move, think of the movement in our body generates force, and the movement in the horse's body generates force,
Mhm.
right? The idea of balance is equalizing opposing forces that gives us a zero sum, which is no force, stillness, right? So I'm going to help you work with your body to feel your way into skeletal stillness, which is how you control, you have to adjust your body weight and your muscle tone in order to prevent your bones from moving. And this is, riders who say move with the horse, they're not wrong because that's what it feels like. Riders or trainers that tell you to be still, they're not wrong because that's what it looks like.
Yeah, it's very well said. It's very well said. Yeah.
So the first thing when you get on is you're going to play between the top half, bottom half of your body with your sort of top of your pelvis, belly being the midpoint.
Okay.
And what you have to experiment with, and I'm just pushing all of your dressage buttons,
No, this is great. I love it.
you need to slouch.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So kind of feel in your chair while we're talking that if you take your riding position,
Yep.
notice that it pulls body weight upward.
Yep,
Now,
totally.
if you just slouch,
Yeah, I felt that in a huge way. Yeah.
boom, all your
'Cause it's
body weight
like
goes,
because the chair doesn't move back,
yes,
it's so much clearer about like, oh yeah, the center of gravity just shifted by like 30% down when and I'm not,
yeah,
if I had a mirror on my side, I'm probably not looking like this at all.
not
It's
at all.
just,
And
yeah,
it's more of, I think of dropping my sternum in and down. It's like a
yeah,
invisible slouch.
yeah.
And I feel my shoulders fall back and down because all that shoulders back we've heard forever. For women, it really screws up our seat because we tend to push the sternum up and forward when we do shoulders back.
And I've certainly been told, the same thing. And I've certainly said that to my own riders, like open your sternum up and then you watch and you're like, that did some things, but that did other bad things.
Yes,
So it
yes.
makes
And
what you're saying.
with
Yes.
male riders, that is the best instruction to stabilize the seat. For female riders, it is the perfect instruction to destabilize the seat,
Is that
right?
because of the anatomical differences in the
Hmm.
pelvis or something? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so female bodies have more degrees of natural curvature through the lumbar, and we have a different shape pelvis. That's how they tell male from female skeletons, is the pelvis is a different shape, and by the way, 20% more connective tissue. So
Really?
yes. So for men,
Wow.
that's because we're built to have babies without breaking,
Yes. Yes.
right?
We have it ideally. Yep. Yep.
And so we're a lot stretchier. And
Hmm.
so for us, because the seat is everything to the horse's balance. So that's why I always zero in first on what I see through the lumbar, core, pelvis, upper legs. And that is what I consider the seat is sort of from just below the hip joint to the bottom of the ribs. That
Yep.
to me is the seat. And for men, when men sort of push the thoracic spine forward and open through the sternum, it actually stabilizes the lumbar and pelvis. And so that's why it's a perpetual instruction. And why women struggle to get a stable seat is because it has the absolute opposite effect on our body. So when we do that with the sternum and the thoracic spine, we overarch the lumbar. We can't control it. You can't get away from it. And that
Yep.
lifts our body weight too high and makes our seat unstable.
Yep. And a lot of
So
other things.
Yeah. So for women, and write down these steps, you're going to play with them. First thing is slouch. You feel the weight go. You're going to learn to drop the sternum, and straightening out the shoulders is a piece of cake for women because we have no upper body strength. So don't worry about the shoulders. Just slouch away, right?
Yeah.
What the slouching does is it not only shifts your weight down, but it gives you access to the muscle coordination you need to find to straighten the lumbar spine.
Okay.
It's very
I definitely,
specific
I
muscles.
believe you. I just need to feel it.
You need to
Yeah.
feel it. So what you're
Like,
going to do is when you slouch, all your weight will go in your seat. But if you put one hand on the back of your lumbar just while you're sitting now, sort of feel if you lift the sternum, the lumbar arches forward.
yep, for sure.
When you slouch, the lumbar already straightens out a little. And then see if you can find the muscles in your belly that push your hand. Keep one hand on your lumbar. And basically, what you're doing is using your belly muscles to push that hand on your lumbar backwards.
Yep. That I'm familiar with. Yeah.
Okay, great. So then now we've got the weight in the lower half, the lumbar straight, and all women wind up with too much weight in the seat compared to the legs after doing that. So
Cool.
with
I was
your,
just about to ask you that. Okay, I'll let you
yeah,
keep.
so
I'm like, I'm
one
really heavy on my
hand,
headphones. Yeah.
yeah, so here's the little thing, machination you're going to go through to figure this out. You're basically going to start with a slouch, then you're going to straighten the lumbar. Then it helps to have your hand on the sternum and the lumbar as you rock the torso on the seat bones through the hip joint, right? So you'll notice if you, without arching the lumbar as you come forward, you're actually kind of feeling like you're bringing the lumbar back as your shoulders are rocking forward. And you feel how that takes the weight out of your seat and puts it in your
Very
legs.
much. Very much.
So what you're looking for when you get on, this is how I find my vertical alignment, no matter the horse or the saddle,
I was just say right to
is,
the deal too. Yep.
yeah. So you're going to go slouch, straighten the lumbar, and rock. And when you're rocking forward and back on the seat bones with the sternum down, with the lumbar straight, that's when you're going to feel on her. If I want to build a back and I have an unstable barrel and hindquarter, I tend to want slightly more weight in my thigh bones compared to my seat. It gives me
This
more control.
That's so interesting just because I was messing around. I rode her last night again, and then tracking right was particularly hard last night, and I kept trying to from in my head on my own, I use like the idea of like a three-legged stool for my pubic bone and then two sit bones.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really trying to get a little bit more on to the pubic bone without like driving it down. And then that ended up a little bit internally rotating the thigh, like not
Yes,
in
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
but not in a gripping way, just in a supportive channel. And she was
That's
like,
the
"Thank you."
kind
Yeah.
of the other way I know I'm vertical because your brain will say, because right now your habit is your weight is between, it's kind of between the upper and lower part of your torso, but it's not in your legs. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and then you tend to be heavier in the seat, which further lightens the legs, and you cannot control your stability from there. It's physically impossible.
That
It's
makes
like,
me feel better.
yeah,
Like, why does it look like that? How do I change it? Okay.
it's
Yeah.
because your weight is still a bit high and back, even
Okay.
though you look very vertical, right? So you're not far off. It's just, we're just going to tweak it a little.
Yeah.
And so the slump brings more weight down.
Yeah.
The lumbar straightening from the coordination of your core muscles is going to stabilize your lumbar and pelvis. Then it's a matter of rocking towards a 2-point position to back on your pockets. Somewhere in there, you're going to feel your weight naturally shift between your seat and your thigh bones, not your feet, your seat and thigh bones. And the other thing that tells you you're vertical dynamically, which is just crazy, is as you walk forward and back, the deeper adductor muscle, the inner thigh, naturally activates when you're vertical. So
Okay,
if you,
that feeling from last night. Yeah.
yeah, if you feel your quads and hamstrings are working, rock more forward
Yeah.
until you feel that deeper inner, almost a groin muscle. It's like the outer muscles on the thigh bone let go, and there's a gentle activation that sort of feels like it's what they describe classically as the wet towel feeling of draping. It's
Yeah.
very sticky because the quads and hamstrings are round muscles, and the adductor is the flat muscle of the thigh, and it's closest to the bone. So you feel that sort of, like you said, tripod or little stool support to the pelvis.
Gotcha.
And I look for the activation of the adductor muscle tells me when my torso is vertical. And
Okay.
depending on the saddle or depending on the horse and how they're using their back, I may feel way too far forward. My brain
Right.
is telling me, why are you in 2 point, right? And and some horses, especially if they have a visible dropped back, I basically I'm as far forward as I can go without being on my crotch. Like I'm
Gotcha.
just, yeah, kind of
Okay.
right with more weight in my legs because the weight in the thigh bones, if you think of it this way, our pelvis is up here dealing with the top of the back rolling, but our
Yeah.
thigh bones are here
Yeah.
and dealing with sort of the side of the barrel rolling.
Yep.
And so that's why more weight in the thigh bones compared to the seat is super helpful for
Yeah.
horses with dropped backs and wiggly pelvises.
Yep.
Mhm.
No, think that's very, very helpful because it's just adding a lot of clarity and logistical steps to things that seem otherwise very elusive. So it's appreciated.
And you will be shocked at how the horse responds to those changes in your body.
Yeah, I
So,
believe.
and I think if you downloaded that chapter I did on feel,
Yes. Yeah.
look, what you need to do, the first image I play with is that bowl of water. And if you do nothing but that on this horse, she will start adjusting her balance like she does on the long reins. So even though she keeps her neck longer under saddle, there's actually, because your center is moving, her back
Yeah.
is less stable, her hindquarter is less stable. So she actually, when in the riding, even though the posture looks better, she doesn't have as much control over her stability and weight management.
I
And
see.
so if you quiet your seat and really focus, like once you get the weight down, the lumbar straight, and you find that sort of weight in the thighs, it'll be super easy to control that bowl of water. And I
Cool.
use the bowl of water because it perfectly describes how often, like if you carry a big bowl of dog water across the kitchen and you manage not to spill it, I don't know how we do that, but we can't get too tense and we can't get too loose,
Yep.
right? And so it's sort of that combination. So the horse's movement is what we're coping with. And her movement is trying to slosh that bowl of water in your pelvis.
Yep.
However, we actually balance water, we just put that bowl inside our pelvis and do the same thing. And I don't know how we do it, but everybody can do it.
Right. We all eventually figure it out. I mean,
Right.
they're like biofeedback for us because at least we know, even if it's hard to feel exactly where we should be, if they start going better, we know, okay, that's information.
So the harder we work to resist sloshing, the less balanced the horse is. The way we feel this good steps and the self carriage coming through is we don't work to keep the water still.
Yeah. Okay.
It's easy. So
So
when the horse is balanced, they don't slosh the rider. That is the feeling of balance. And when they slosh the rider a lot, like what she's doing, it's a lot of work that nobody sees you do, sort of like plank. You're
yeah.
sweating, right? But what you're working in a resistant muscle use. and you know how and where to shift your weight like sand in order to prevent the water from becoming unstill. Or some people like jello instead of water. I go, fine. Don't let the jello shake. I go, the
She feels
horse,
like water. Some horses are Jello horses, but she feels like water because the changes are fast, and can have a little bit more, uh, just it's more fluid than
yeah.
Jello. Yeah, it's fast and more fluid.
So the
Very light.
first thing you might notice is in the position you're in, you're the one sloshing the water. Plus, she's the one sloshing the water.
Mhm.
So the changes you're going to make that we just talked about, you'll be able to take your part of it out of the equation and keep the water perfectly still as a bowl of water inside your pelvis, right? Then what you're going to feel is at halt where you can keep it still because she'll even be shifting weight at halt. You'll feel a little bit.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Once she's in motion, your job is to resist all sloshing. How do I shift my weight? How do I adjust my muscle tone? How do I reorganize my muscles to prevent the water from moving in order to keep the bowl of water still, right?
Gotcha.
And what that does is your torso, as a dynamic weight, we're starting to, through resistance, you're basically everything that makes that bowl of water move or slosh is an imbalance. It's part of a dysfunctional coordination, poor muscle use. So when we're resisting that with our core, before we ever give a leg a rein aid, we're working in 3 dimensions at the same time to guide her to balance. And it is wicked hard on an unstable horse. And your neighbors think, why are you just walking that horse around? Doesn't even look like you're working. And sweat is just pouring off of you.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So one question I have is when I have been tracking left versus right under saddle, there've always been significant differences. And in this new way of thinking about the horse and understanding my body, I am not sure if I'm on the right track with helping her with those differences. So I can get more specific.
Well, what's going to happen is when you track left and when you track right, none of us function symmetrically.
Right.
What you're going to feel in her back, and if you want to exaggerate it, if you stand on her at halt and you overbend the neck to the right, you're
Yeah.
going to feel how it causes the barrel to roll left
Yeah.
and vice versa. What horses do, because they can have inverted rotation or excessive rotation or just hyper rotation, and it's kind of a wild card. So with her neck straight on a turn, if she pushes up on your inside seat bone and leg, if you're balancing that water, you're automatically going to resist
Yeah.
with your weight
Yeah.
and your skeletal position. That's what fixes the problem, right?
And
And what you might notice is if she tracks right and she's high on the right side, and she tracks left and she's high on the left side, that's just normal horse baby imbalance.
not
If
always that straightforward. Yeah.
Okay, if she's high on the right, tracking both directions, then you have a weakness associated with the same hind leg, or vice
Hmm.
versa.
Hmm.
You have a restriction in that hind leg.
Gotcha.
And
It's
so, by sort of what we're talking about with your seat and your position is, and that's what I mean, is that no matter what she throws at you, which is the unpredictable part of bodies, when you're vertical and you're resisting the front back changes related to speed and you're resisting the left right changes, that bowl of water is sort of encompassing all of that at the same time with the most important aid, which is your entire body weight.
okay.
You are
So
mass and weight having an influence on the forces of motion.
so theoretically, if I'm able to start to, let me reverse engineer this. Can I explain what I feel to her tracking, what I feel from her tracking right?
Mhm.
And then you can tell me if like, yes, Tess, that will still go away when you kind of master your own bowl of water. Is that
Yes.
okay?
Yep.
Okay. So tracking right, often it is um the right is a little bit more stable in the rotation. She usually is high, pushing more up on my right sit bone, tracking right. And then at the same time, the haunches want to move a bit out to the left, and then she really wants to roll, like fall in with the right front and move the barrel into my right calf. Um, I'll pause there.
I'm doing it in my body to try to feel
Totally,
it.
totally.
So
The
that's
haunches move
complicated.
up.
That is
Yeah,
complicated.
yeah. And it's for years, it has been like, what the
That's a
fuck?
that's what I call a double twist. So
Okay.
a very straightforward normal baby thing would be underusing the right hind, pushing up
Yep.
on the right seat bone, overloading the left front,
Yep.
or vice
Totally.
versa, right-handed,
We have
left-handed.
that tracking left more. Yep. That pattern.
So
Not,
that's more
not,
straightforward
yep. It's
to the
easier to the
left.
left.
Okay,
Fix.
so
Yep.
to the right, what she's doing is adding in an extra layer of protection because she's going the wrong way.
Okay.
It's not a straightforward flow through her body. So basically, the upward push on your right seat bone, what you feel there are the tightening of the back and the hindquarter muscles. That's what
Yep.
pushes us up, which always
Totally.
means the skeleton and the weight is going the other way.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Much.
But
Absolutely.
if
Absolutely.
she's also falling on the right front and pushing into your right calf,
Yep.
then she's created a secondary compensation pattern
A kink. Yep.
because she was getting too heavy on the left and she had to again double back to the right.
Gotcha.
Does that make
Okay.
sense?
That absolutely makes more sense now that it's explained that way. It's been very consistent for her. I've just never known exactly what the hell I was feeling.
She's going to
Um,
unwind that when it goes from her falling on the right front, pushing on your right calf,
yeah.
to being high on your right seat bone and falling left.
Cool. Okay.
You've gotten through the first layer of compensation, and then there will be the normal layer under that.
Which would be then falling through the left shoulder.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Following.
Yes. And
Okay.
so what you're going to work on, what I would do is to overcome that sort of double compensation. Circles on the long reins to the right would
Yep.
help tremendously, but also be very difficult for her.
Yep. She
So,
stopped a lot more to the right than to the left on the circles. Yeah.
and let her stop, but even if your circles aren't really round, even
Okay.
if you sort of start by cutting the arena down by a quarter and then half, and then you're just, cutting out 3/4 of the arena, find ways to incorporate more turns to the right.
Okay.
Because that right hind it could be affecting the hip joint, the SI on the right side, maybe involve the lumbar or the sacrum.
Yep.
And so there's sort of deeper, stronger muscles that you have to kind of unwind the process. And it also means she's protecting the right hind leg way more than the left hind leg.
For
Th-
sure. Her
Yeah,
most significant suspensory injury that she's had behind was a proximal right hind suspensory.
there you go.
That took a year and a half for her to come back from. It was just, there wasn't even a lesion. It was just fiber disruption, but she was very lame for
And
about 6.
yeah, and that is very typical of horses that have layers of dysfunction, is that there's been a pain issue
Yeah.
somewhere. And
Because it
that's,
definitely wasn't as hard. I only had her for 6 months before that injury, but to my memory, it wasn't this hard. She was a wobbly horse, but it wasn't so complex in the compensation patterns until after that high suspensory.
yeah.
So I just,
And so that complication she has, then what didn't make sense to you is because, and I couldn't explain in detail by any stretch exactly how she's doing it, but she's basically found a way to, like, maybe in protecting the right hind suspensory, the weight load to the left front became so substantial that she found a way to go, I can't keep doing that, I'm going to fall, and then
okay.
shifting it back to the right. And
Yep.
that's going to involve muscle torque, tension, chronic tightness, and
Totally.
some kind of twist rotational issue through the spine.
Yeah. It
So
makes sense.
that's a good example of why I don't always work horses evenly on directions.
Yep.
And she's going to need more time to the right, but she's going to go slower and stop more frequently, which is why you give her more time on the clock
Gotcha.
because
Gotcha.
she can't work through it as fast to the right. She's going to go through more layers. So she's a horse I might do in a session 45 minutes right, 15 minutes left,
Gotcha.
something
Yep.
like that. I wouldn't
And
do equal.
similar under saddle, like if she's sort of um as far as like would I spend also a little bit more time tracking right under saddle than tracking left? Okay.
Yeah.
As long as she stayed in the learning frame of mind and everything.
And
Because
with weight on her back, you can play with circles versus straight lines, but it kind of depends. If she gets a little zippy,
yeah,
then put her on a circle under saddle. If she's losing forward under saddle, put her out on the rail. And what you're going to find is riding, as you play with what we talked about as a rider, when I have like all the horses I have that have very complicated patterns like that, if they're strong enough to be ridden, I find I work through those issues faster riding than I do on the ground.
I think that makes sense if I'm able to relatively quickly accomplish what you were talking to me about
Hmm.
in my seat. Like she'll let me know.
Yeah,
She's very clear that way. I mean, the to be fully transparent with when I'm riding her tracking right, and this night was actually an example of that. I could never get her off a 20-meter circle because of how much weight she was putting to the right front. Like I
which
would
is
have had to
fine.
do. Okay.
Like sometimes I find, especially with complicated horses or in the early stages of getting the back and hindquarters stable, steering is the one thing I can throw out the window
Well,
because
I'm
I
used to
go,
that.
yeah, I,
Yeah.
I go in an enclosed area, theoretically, on every single path of travel possible. The back should be level, the neck should be straight, the top line muscle should be long. The hind leg should be striding equally and balanced between pushing and braking. So if I'm working on internal stuff, I go, let the horse pick the path of travel. And right now, you're even letting her pick her stride length and tempo and speed. So it's like I would stay very focused on level and straight. And if she kind of falls left or right, and you keep the back level and straight, sometimes it starts as a fall and it turns into a discovery. So, like, for example, she may fall on the right shoulder and your circle gets tighter, 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 and you're just keeping the neck straight and the back level. And nine times out of 10, that horse goes, oh, my right front leg abducts instead of because they fall because the inside front's going to the midline.
Yep.
And they
Yep.
fall, 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 and then they go whammo, and the leg goes the right way. And they're like, oh, that's how
So
I don't
question,
fall.
um, I have always thought of it as part of the reason they also fall because I knew less about the kinematics of the leg until I discovered your work. And so this might be a false understanding or it might be part of it, but I was sort of taught to also think they also fall more to the right front if the left hind is a bit more disengaged or traveling laterally, especially in the gait where it's part of a diagonal pair. And so I've kind of noticed that whenever she is falling a significant amount in with the shoulder, her hindquarters are never placed to the right at the same time. They're almost always placed slightly left. Um, and if I slow myself down, it feels like the hindquarter step out happens a half a second before the weight shifts to the right front. But sometimes I
Well,
don't know.
what you understood theoretically is correct, but it's what I call the straightforward version. And what your
Okay.
horse is showing you is I'm not straightforward.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so what you're describing, yes, I agree. And that's what I would call a right-handed horse. But
Okay.
what you're describing is a horse that's doing all that with the front end, but the weaker of the two hind legs is the right hind.
Yep.
And so that's why I go bodies are unpredictable. And it's like I've had horses in long and low be able to drop their back and disengage their hindquarters. And I'm like, how is that possible? But it is entirely possible, especially when the horse has been restricted into a frame or told we move at this speed, we do this stride length, because then
Right.
that's where they have to develop more and more complexity to get the job done with, because the simple mechanical imbalance now is creating a bigger problem. So they add more layers to that. And every rehab I do, some start off with 6 layers and I'm working back to normal stuff. And some have 1 layer or no layers. They're very straightforward. It just, every horse is different.
Yep. Yeah, and they always teach us. That's helpful though, because it's such a human thing to try and get it back to like a simple, this causes that, and it's just like, no,
Yeah.
it is just more complicated.
Well, and the good news is because it's so complicated, that the only thing we all have in common is the correct ideal use.
Right.
But the way the body compensates for not ideal is unpredictable, can be really complicated with multiple layers, and can change within the same horse within the same ride. So
Yeah,
I go,
very,
that's just wildly unpredictable.
very
So the
much.
only way I can cope with all that unpredictability is what we talked about, like her straight level midline, your bowl of water,
Yep.
and let her right now choose her speed, stride length, and direction, unless she goes to a full halt. Even if she trots, you could let her trot or ask her to walk again, doesn't matter. But
You
you're
wouldn't call
allowing
it.
her, when you focus on what the ideal should feel like, you're timing on your aids between your weight, your torso use, your muscle activity, and your reins and legs. It's like all of that is sort of saying, not there, not there, not there, not there, but it almost goes faster than our brains can process. And,
Yeah,
and,
it
and I
does.
go, because as soon as we're working in 3 dimensions, which is what you're doing as a rider, the bowl of water pulls in 3 dimensions, but doesn't hurt our head. Like we can kind of imagine that, right? And on the long reins, we're working in 2 dimensions.
Mhm.
And the way we're trained to traditionally ride is 1 dimension at best. Like we're so far behind, right? And
Yeah.
so what you did with your body, you're going to play with your body weight as a rider and the bowl of water, you're going to be making 3 dimensional corrections every freaking stride
Yeah.
that are going to have a direct impact on the center of her entire body and her back and her hindquarter way more than the shoulders, neck, and head. So you're going to find she changes the use of the shoulders and the neck and head as the stability is starting to come through under the saddle.
Gotcha. So when we're looking at a rider who is superb as far as their balance and their connection through their pelvis, is it just that a lot of this came somewhat like before words relatively naturally to counteract the forces of the horse? Or is it sometimes just that everyone learns this? If you get really good, you learn this, you just don't always know how you learn this. That's a really complicated.
Yes, because it's very hard to describe. It's
Yeah,
one of those
you're the first
things,
person who's done
it's
it for
very
me.
hard to put words to. And even sort of like we talked about, shoulders back, great for men, horrible for women,
Yep.
right? But nobody tells us that. Or move with the horse is what we like. Our brain senses movement when our weight is changing internally and we're changing muscle tone. So when you're up on her, you never feel like you're still. You
Yep.
feel like you're constantly adapting and adjusting.
Yep.
And if you separate your weight and soft tissues from your bones and imagine yourself as a skeleton, the purpose of feeling like you're moving with the horse is to keep your skeleton still, which means you're actually resisting the forces of motion generated by the horse. And it's that resistance that is an aid. That's what defines an aid, is a physical resistance. So by you keeping the bowl of water quiet while she's moving, you're resisting left, right, front, back, up, down, all dimensions at
Yeah.
the same time in the very center of her body, which is where the point of organization is for
Yeah.
everything. So I go, that's why the rider is so influential. And people I find who sort of have a natural talent, just the way they describe it isn't the way the rest of us like,
Understand. Yeah.
yeah, like when they say be still, normal people stiffen.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
isn't what they mean, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when they say move with the horse, normal people get all loosey goosey. That isn't what it means, right? But
Yeah.
those are the words we use, and it's just misinterpreted.
Okay.
And so, super talented riders, whether they can explain it or not, they all look the same: quiet, soft, stable, but a fluidness to it.
Yes. Very much. Yeah.
You don't see them jarring around. You don't see them rocking or being stiff, and you don't see the loosey goosey stuff,
Yeah.
right? And whether it's English, Western, racing, dressage, jumping, that's the look of the body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It becomes a part of the horse. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's what you're going to work on by experimenting with what we talked about. And when you nail that part, this mare is so receptive now to
Yeah.
making changes that you kind of have the luxury of being able to focus on yourself for probably 6 rides. Like just really experimenting with, is my skeleton moving with my soft tissue, right? Or it makes us hurt our brain hurts on a crooked horse to have our body weight unequal left to right. That's what makes our brain think we're crooked, but then we're not. Oh,
One
that's the last thing for her. Once you do get your weight in more in your legs, thigh bones compared to your seat, one of the little hacks I used all the time is while you're riding, every once in a while, glance down at your own thigh bones.
make sure that they're the same.
Your thigh
They
bones
look the same.
should always be symmetrical to each other.
Yeah.
And in order to do that on a crooked horse, sometimes I'm sitting on the right side of the saddle or
I
the left
sit
side of the saddle or the back
when I
half of
try
the saddle.
right, I have to literally pick myself up and move
Yeah.
right to get my thigh bones the same. Otherwise, they're forward and raised on the right side.
Yes.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And when you
That's
make your thigh bones symmetrical, no matter what your brain says, right?
yeah.
And then your front back stability is that relationship of weight mostly in the lower half and weight slightly more in the thighs than the seat. That's your front back stability. And then the left right stability you've already gotten pretty good at, but that's sort of look down and check your thighs.
Cool. Okay. That is
Mhm.
very, very helpful. Thank you.
Awesome.
Um,
I'm just thrilled at how she's doing. Like she's just
yeah,
clicking along in her
yeah.
recovery.
It's it's no, it's very encouraging. Like she has days that are a lot harder and I can't do that much with her. And then other
Mhm.
days I just go with the flow. She's that
Yep.
mare.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mirrors are like that. That
Thank you again. I really, really appreciate
was, thanks for the update. I'm super happy. Email me, or if you want to do a follow-up, just let me know. But
it.
and actually, if you can, get a little bit of video of you experimenting with your body. And if
Okay.
nothing else, look at that for yourself. But if you
Yeah.
also want to send it to me, I'm happy to give you any feedback or anything that might need tweaking.
No, that's a really good idea. Thank you for that. I
Hmm.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I will probably see you soon. And
Okay. I stopped